Packaging is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. This is one of the biggest pain points that most brands share with me. You work really hard to create a product that's aligned with a great mission. Your packaging needs to be aligned with that same great mission. In this podcast, you're going to hear Kelly talk about what he calls a fool's errand. What he means by this is that when you put your product in a package in a recycling bin, most often it just ends up in a landfill. You're going to learn more about that in a little bit, so stay tuned. The reason that Kelly and I chose to do another podcast and another mini course is to help answer many of the questions that we received at Expo West. These are the specific pain points people shared with us that were not included in podcast episode 116. The shocking truth about sustainable packaging, strategies to save time, money, and grow sales. Basically, what all Expo exhibitors and natural brands need to know. I'll put a link to the podcast episode, as well as the free mini course that we've created together in the podcast show notes and on the podcast webpage. The name of that free mini course is Earth Digestible Print-on-Demand Packaging Solutions. You're going to want to check it out. In that course, we talk about what Earth Digestible packaging actually really means and strategies that you can use to gain sustainable sales and compete more effectively in any category. This podcast episode is a snippet of the new course we just created. The secret compostable strategy your brand needs to know. Strategies to grow sales with Earth Digestible Print-on-Demand Packaging as a profit center. Yes, you heard me correct. A strategy to leverage your packaging as a profit center to help you get your products from more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers. This is something that we discuss in depth in the free mini course, over and above what's included in the podcast. You will learn many helpful strategies, including how to use your packaging to reduce your trade spending, maximize your trade marketing ROI, and how to personalize each item, how to customize your packaging for a specific event, and how to turn your packaging into a profit center. We also talk about small brands and what small brands need to be thinking about when they think about packaging. Spoiler alert, you're probably thinking about packaging in the wrong way, and changing your thinking about packaging can help you compete more effectively, to leverage this new technology, and to grow sales and to differentiate your brand on a retailer shelf. At Brand Secrets and Strategies, you learn how to save valuable time and money, where you learn strategies to get your products on more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, empowering brands and raising the bar. Kelly, thanks for coming on today and for talking to us about sustainable and compostable packaging. Can you first start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey to NatureFlex?
Will do. So, as you said, Kelly Williams, I've been in the packaging industry for, almost 25 years. Chemical engineer by training, and I ended up starting out in this industry like right when these big companies were merging together, like ExxonMobil, and these big companies are all coming together. So a lot of things really changed at that point. And up until about 2006, I always wondered to myself, when's it going to slow down? We just kept adding more plants and more plastic, and it was all about more, more, more. I'm thinking there's got to be a point. So I'm on that side developing these incredible film materials, plastics that go into the films that make up your food lasts like on a shelf. So I'm there designing what I think is the best thing for the planet, not realizing where we're at today. So from there, I kind of got into other technologies, and then I got into digital printing, which I'd like to talk a little bit about. And that kind of led me to where I am now, which is with Futomura, the NatureFlex films, which are naturally biodegradable, compostable, marine degradable films used in flexible packaging. And what led me here is based on emerging brands that are asking about it. They want it. And there's just a lot going on right now between the choices that a brand has to make in terms of, do I go recycling or do I go compostable, or do I just continue to down gauge what I'm currently using? So there's just a lot going on involving packaging. In fact, it's interesting because at this year's Expo West versus last year's Natural Products Expo West, last year, for the first time ever, packaging became like this cornerstone conversation. And so it's not like a tertiary conversation that other people in the company have with suppliers. It's at the top, to where this year, I'm not even sure there was another conversation. It was all about packaging, which is pretty exciting, but it also a testament to the reality of the situation.
Thanks, Kelly, for sharing that. And one of the reasons why we're having this conversation is a follow up to the mini course that we already did about earth digestible print on demand packaging. To your point, at Expo West, there were a lot of questions about sustainability and compostability. What does that mean? And that's why we decided to have this second conversation to try to clear that up and try to answer many of the questions that people were asking at Expo West. So thank you for coming on today. And one of the things that's great about this relationship that you and I form is that I help brands get their products on more retailer shelves in the hands of more shoppers by teaching them the advanced strategies to level the playing field between them and the big companies. You have the unique opportunity to bring in that part about the packaging, because the packaging is your brand. And so being an expert in that area, bringing that piece to our conversation makes so much sense. And even better yet, the fact that you can talk about something that is pretty revolutionary in terms of the way we look at the category right now, earth digestible print on demand packaging. So first of all, let's talk about what is sustainability and how would you define it, and what do brands need to know or understand about sustainability so that we can frame this conversation.
Yes, and there's a lot of sustainability in a lot of ways is almost a vague term, right? Because everybody has a different understanding of it. Unfortunately, for some, I think sustainability means managing downstream liability, and for others, it is doing the right thing from a genuine perspective, but not sure what that is. So you're seeing a lot of people out genuinely trying to understand, and they're getting misinformation, maybe getting bad information. They're being convinced that this is the right thing to do, and I'm going to try to convince you that I feel like I have the right way. But again, do your homework. So it's kind of like a really dynamic. I think in the beginning, brands really didn't know even who to put into those positions, right? Sustainability. And now there's people that really do have experience in that field that they're bringing in. So it's a very dynamic space. But to me, sustainability means, what do we need to do immediately today to even think about sustaining 9 billion people? And so I talk about packaging in general, which we all know single-use packaging is a big issue. But I tend to focus on flexible packaging, which is the most important because it's been growing at a phenomenal rate for a very good reason. It's ubiquitous in society for a very good reason. You cannot feed 9 billion people without it. So when it first started to take over from rigid packaging, there were these great benefits. It's thinner, it's lighter, you can produce it in Germany and send it to the US, and it allowed so much flexibility. You can change it very, very readily. But the one thing that we all knew on the other side of that, it was like this deep, dark secret that no one talked about, is you can't do anything with it after it's been used. After that product's been consumed, there's nothing you can do with it. So we knew that, and from a flexible packaging perspective, if we continue to put products into packaging that ultimately harm the very soil for which you grow the food that you process to put in that package, or that you feed the animals that you then process to put in that package, you kind of eliminate the need for the package. So packaging waste is a very serious problem. And what's happened, in the last 10 years alone, we've produced as much plastic as the entire previous century. So the rate of production is nowhere near slowing down. And what you realize is the flexible packaging industry has become so efficient and so incredibly over-engineered that you can literally package a bag of chips that even under sunlight will go rancid in a very short period of time. We can put chips in a bag that you can eat 12 months from now, and they're fine. So that incredible over-engineered, cheap, efficient system is akin to other things we've seen in history, where when verticals get that efficient and the world around it changes, the only way for innovation to happen is for it to break. It has to break. for those innovations to happen. And we really are truly in that right now. We're seeing it. We've been seeing it playing out for about 8 years because we make one of the key films that replace, just about every flexible package. There's a role that our film plays in it because of its heat resistance, its stiff, and all those mechanical properties. But that's already happening, and it's coming from emerging brands. Emerging brands have created a tsunami against the legacy brands to the point that they can't buy them any faster. And as they buy them, it actually adds more complexity to their already chaos, and it's never going to stop. So walking around shows like Expo West, it's like you're watching an industry in deregulation. Anyone could become a brand. All you need is a decent product, a great story, a catchy name, and you're in business because you don't have to go to the store shelf to grow your brand. So legacy brands are protecting the shelf space and the end caps where the battle's being held elsewhere. And I think that these brands represent the future of the food industry, quite frankly. And what they don't know as they're trying to figure out how to do the right thing is they're not getting the information that they need. That just seems to be pretty loud and clear that they're really trying to understand what should I do, because they genuinely do worry every time they buy another 2 million bags of polypropylene that they know will outlive their great-great-grandchildren. It worries them. So I think part of what we can do here, Daniel, is to kind of weave together the things that you and I both do, and show like a coherent way to rethink the way a product goes to market.
Thanks for sharing that. So let me unpack that. There was a lot there. First of all, sustainability. Most of these small brands, most people think that when you put something in the recycle bin, automatically it gets recycled and gets reused. That's not true. We were going to talk about that in a little bit. So we'll dig into a little bit more later. But the point is, and what you're sharing, and I really appreciate you getting into this, is that that's not true. There really isn't a lot of good solutions. At least there wasn't a lot of good solutions in terms of packaging. And so you use something one time, you throw it away, and it ends up in a landfill. So let's back up a little bit and let's start tearing this apart or breaking this down. So you made the comment that emerging brands are the ones that are changing the industry, the ones that are leading this charge. So when you're talking about emerging brands, one of the things that I think about are the small disruptive brands that you talked about that are able to come up with a product pretty much in their kitchen or something like that and get it on the shelf pretty quickly. But the reality is that it takes a lot of time to buy the film, to get the film shipped here, to get it printed, etc. So let's first talk about what do things look like today. If you're a brand and you've come up with a product and everyone, including your mom, loves it, how long does it take you to get that product onto a retailer shelf? And what I'm really getting at is what's involved in getting that product into a package and then getting that package to market.
Perfect question, because that's really part of how the emerging brands are kind of chipping away at the foundation of the existing system. So the way packaging is made, and I'll show you an example here. So this would be an example of a flexible package. It's a pouch. So you generally have this layer of film, plastic film, that you print the image. So when you're looking at it, the ink is actually on the back side of that film. And then you glue it together with adhesives to all the other materials to create this final package. And that takes time, right? And it tends to be wasteful in the way each of those steps. But the thing is, it always starts with printing. So the first thing you do is print versus, pre-making the package and then just surface imaging it, protecting it and getting it out. That never happened because when the plastics industry brought flexible packaging to the CPGs, those types of overprint protective coatings just didn't exist. They do today. In fact, it's happening more and more. It's just nobody talks about it going to that model. But when you think about it from a brand's perspective, they're all outsourcing. They're outsourcing packaging. They're outsourcing a lot of the actual product manufacturing. They're outsourcing marketing. They're outsourcing creative design. They're really focused on retail relationships and making sure they dominate that shelf space So by the time they go through hundreds of ideas to come up with the few that they go to market with, or to go to the next step, which is actually prototyping, where somebody will make you, 50 or 5,000 of these that you take to a show or to some way to figure out, what product am I taking to market. So you go through all that process. By the time you get to the point that you're ready to execute, you're looking at another 3 to 4 months to even get it into a package, because of how long it takes to get the packaging, to figure out that everything has been vetted. Can I put the new non-GMO icon on it? Can I, all the stuff with labeling alone just continues to extend that amount of time. So for the bigger the brand, the more so this is true. It'll take you a year to launch one new product per category because of how much effort it takes to do that. With e-commerce and other channels, that could be faster, but that packaging piece is still. So you finally get that opportunity as a new brand to put your product, let's say, on Whole Foods shelf in 13 states. If they need it next month, you're not going to be able to do it because it just takes too long to get the packaging.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because you're absolutely right. One of the things I think people don't understand, and again, this is why we're having this conversation, is that if you want to put a product, if you're a small brand, and when I say small brand, basically anything smaller than a P&G, a Frito, or something like that, in terms of your packaging needs, okay? So if you are a smaller brand and you need 10,000 units of packaging, that is a small order that most packaging companies in the U.S. don't have time for, don't have the capacity, don't have the capability to take care of. So when you're talking about that packaging, you've shared with me several times that someone needs to go over to Asia to buy the film, to have it shipped over here. Well, that takes time. And then, as you mentioned, the shipping costs, the having the product, that, buying the product and having all the printing and stuff done. And then, to your point, you get another label, another certification, etc. That elongates the process. So anyhow, so you've got the product, you've put it in a bag, and now you're ready to put it on a shelf. But like I said, you've got another certification or something you want to put on it. You found a mistake in your packaging and you need to pivot and you need to change. That takes time. So how much time, if I were to come to you, if you were a packaging, the person that actually going to put my product in a package, how long would it take for you to order the packaging, get the printing done and everything else for one SKU just to get one product on a retailer shelf without any other changes in the process?
And you're absolutely right, because the manufacturers of flexible packaging have also been getting bigger, just like the CPGs. So they have resources. For decades, CPGs have not necessarily invested in human resources with expertise in packaging. They really just rely on their suppliers to do it. Well, as those suppliers get smaller in numbers, they're not exactly, expanding the number of people they have. So the legacy brands tend to kind of dominate those relationships. So as a young brand coming in saying, hey, I need packaging, first of all, they're not going to get the attention. Second of all, no one's going to make, 5 SKUs by 15,000 stand-up pouches. So they're forced to go to Asia to get it because they're willing to do it, but it doesn't come any faster. And that's why when you go around anywhere, you see so many new, either a shop-owned product line or you see a lot of the emerging in what? Unprinted bags and pouches with a label on it. And if you walk around the natural organic retailers, you will find pouches and bags that have been over-labeled because by the time they got the packaging, something changed. And now it's quicker just to spend the money to put a label over top of the label than to order new packaging.
And the reason this matters is because your brand is everything and you want to make a good impression on the retailer shelf. You can't afford to get this wrong. And so if you've got a product that looks like you actually belong in a county fair as opposed to on a retailer shelf, that could hurt your sales. When we're talking about packaging, what it takes to get the product into a package. So we've already talked about how long it takes to get it ordered and get it onto a retailer's shelf. Emerging brands are changing the way that people think about packaging. One of the things that you and I have talked a lot about is that emerging brands are typically mission driven. Now, one of the things that I've shared with you, or that we've had a lot of conversations about, is that I teach brands how to leverage the mission in their around their package, around their product, with retailers to help them drive traffic in stores. So the challenge with that is that you take all your love, all the effort, everything that you've got, and you put it into your package, and you're really proud of it, and you've got a great mission behind it, and then you put it on a retailer's shelf, but yet your packaging doesn't align with the mission that your brand represents or stands for. And as I mentioned, what I do is I try to teach brands how to leverage that mission at shelf. What's unique about this relationship between you and I, and what NatureFlex does, is now all of a sudden your mission can be your packaging, because consumers want products that they know, like, and trust, and they want to know that when they go to recycle a product, that their product's actually going to be recycled. So to go one step further, Earth Digestible, we'll get to that in a minute. Why does that matter from your perspective? What have you seen in the industry, from the big brands to the small brands? And then how do you see this playing into the way consumers look at products today?
Now, ultimately, consumers are driving it. So we all know that. So when I look at the way food gets made and packaging gets made, and they come together into that unit on the shelf, that structural supply chain is grossly incongruent with a consumer-driven value chain that wants authenticity. They want it faster. So it's not the time value of money; it's the money value of time. And you have this great product that people are really starting to resonate around. Let's add to that your social purpose, or your mission makes them want your product even more, but you have to deliver it. And what the larger brands that become so, it's probably fair to say, somewhat paralyzed by that relationship they have with retailers, because that battlefield that they're trying to protect, they have another competitor, which is the retail premium private label brand that wants that shelf space too. So they're fighting this battle here without realizing how all these little fish are schooling together to really put a lot of pressure on the foundation. What they don't realize is they can really break the foundation wide open, because no one has realized that packaging should never be considered a cost center. It should be considered a profit center, because we spend far more time interfacing with packaging on a daily basis than we watch TV commercials, listen to radio ads, or sitting there waiting with your clicker for that first second you can get past that ad on YouTube to watch something. But we look at this. This is the way that you can communicate with your consumers. But today, you don't know who bought it. You have no relationship with that consumer once it leaves your co-packing operation. With new technology, you can actually now engage in that relationship. You can not worry about the things that need to change. You can regionally personalize. You can co-brand. There's things that you can do that you never could do before. And if you are a mission-based organization, even better. Let's say you actually have converted yourself to a B Corp, which was first made possible by the state of Maryland in 2010. I think now 30 some states offer it. And since 2010, we've had 7 times more ethical claims on packaging than before. So these are companies that, and I think it's the greatest thing to happen to American business, is to be able to set yourself up as a B Corp. Because by being a benefit corporation, Daniel, what you have is you have to have clearly stated social purpose goals that you're measured against. But what it allows you to do is to use some of your profits to fuel that. And no matter who decides to own you, they can't prevent you from doing that. So it creates protection from greed, quite frankly. And consumers resonate with that. They don't want to hear your 5-year-old story. They are already giving you credit for that. They want to live as part of a journey with you. And as part of that journey, about all the great things you're doing in Guatemala or South Africa, all those things, they want to be a part of it. They want to be invited into designing the next package, the next product. And today, we're so hung up on cost that we're not thinking about the logical aspect that everything starts and ends with that package. Everything you've done to this point, this is the unitization of it. So we should have every single package uniquely scannable. So you can direct to the consumer if there's ever a problem. Let's say you get a glass shard in some cereal, you can isolate that event instantly because of the track and traceability of that, versus pulling billions of dollars out of the supply chain every year because you just don't know where the event happened. So it's a lot of money that goes into recalls. I mean, they do mock recalls in the industry just to practice what to do if a recall needs to happen. But if you're managing the supply chain at that unit level, you can now manage that, right? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because the pharmaceutical industry has been doing this. It's 100% track and trace. It's because all of the pills, everything is co-packaged at a point where it gets labeled to every label. So they're able to control that and as the food industry is moving more towards that same model, where they're outsourcing that, it becomes logical that you can start tying these things together that aren't new concepts. They've just never been applied to an industry that's blinded with chaos and only looks at packaging as a cost center. Today, Daniel, we have over 1 million combinations of materials to make up flexible packaging when there really only needs to be a dozen, 2 dozen max.
Sounds overly complicated, which I understand. Thanks to you, I've had the privilege of really digging into this and understanding what's involved in a flexible package. It can be pretty complicated, and it can be something that not only is really dry, but you pretty much have to have a PhD to really get through it if you're not part of that environment. So for you to come on, thank you, and make this simple is so helpful. And again, that's why we're doing this. So when we're talking about the ability to have flexible labels and flexible packaging and being able to change it and make that package, let's call it dynamic. One of the benefits of that is you want customers to know, like, and trust your product. Well, nowadays the technology exists where you can identify who planted the seed, where it was planted, how it was taken care of, how it was harvested, and how it ends up in the product. And the point is that with the ability to do that, that creates a unique relationship between you and your end consumer. That allows you to have a conversation with your consumer in terms of you've made a commitment to your consumer saying, this is what we're about, this is what our product is about, but now you can demonstrate it, now you can prove it. You could actually put a snowflake or a barcode on your packaging that helps the consumer go back to your website or something where you can trace back to the ingredients. So on that note, kind of jumping around a little bit in terms of the way we were talking about this, let's talk about print-on-demand packaging. And the reason that's important, a couple reasons. Your brand, you've got, you're ready to go, you've got your product ready, but you've got to get the packaging done. So a minute ago, we're talking about how it takes sometimes 4 to 6 or months or longer to get that packaging on the shelf. But you've already secured the investment to be able to do that. Now your VC company or whoever's loaning you the money, they want a return on their investment. But you can't put a product on the shelf until you get the packaging. So print on demand allows you to shorten that cycle to almost literally get the product on shelf almost instantaneously. We'll talk about that in a second. But now let's overlay that with the ability to customize the packaging and make it unique to the region, as you said, or to the product, or to whatever else. So how does that fit into the industry, and how do you see that changing the way brands can go to market? And one more question: how do you feel brands can leverage that to differentiate themselves from the big brands? So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's actually a great next part of kind of unwrapping this thing. So if you buy a bag of, say, tortilla chips from a major brand that has a lot of real estate on the shelf, chances are that bag was filled within the last 7, 14, 21 days, but the packaging was made 9 months ago. So that's unsustainable as well. But that's the way it's designed. It's designed to put a tank around chips to handle that journey, where that's not the journey of tomorrow. That journey is about reacting quickly to what people want. So you don't ship packaging from one giant plant that services the entirety of North America. You don't ship all of that packaging on a truck to all these different places that are putting the product in the package. You got to think about the old big plant manufacturing to now the mobilization of the capacity you need to do the things you need to do. And this is a conversation amongst major brands that about rethinking the virtual economy and how you take advantage of it. Well, packaging is no different. With digital printing, you can set up a digital printing operation anywhere. You can put it behind glass in a strip mall and be making flexible packaging by removing the complexity of the way it's always been done. You know, Peter Drucker always said, to do something new, you have to stop doing something old. So if you start applying digital printing to the old way of doing things, you're really not doing anything new other than putting, you know, the Green Bay Packers on a bag of chips, which is great. I love the Green Bay Packers. My wife's from Wisconsin, but that's
Won't
not
hold
what
that against you.
but that's not what digital is about. Digital is about managing the supply chain at the unit level. We have to realize that we're approaching a point to where nothing will ever be printed the same way twice. So the ability for a legacy brand to predict that every week they're going to sell 4 million berry flavored granola bars in the greater Atlanta area, those days are numbered. That predictability will not be there because it's about what consumers want. And all these things are going to kind of come together. But what I love about it is how these emerging brands are creating their identity through e-commerce channels. And they're struggling to find some way in and leverage that. They're doing it from the beginning, so they understand it. And when you think about that, the packaging design is different. You're more open to the size. You know, so if I'm a printer and I'm providing these brands flexible packaging, and I say, look, I can't make every size that you want, but I can give you this menu of sizes, and one of them is going to work for you, but you can change what you print on it anytime you want. You can have 50,000, bar wraps on a roll to where every single one of these is different, whether it's just that it scans uniquely scannable or the actual artwork changes. You can now do those things, and by doing that, you're creating a whole new context of what you have to deliver and compete with. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, no, I get it. So let me try to frame this a little bit differently. Not only is that important as a big brand, is one of the challenges, let's call it their Achilles heel. So that's the way they go to market because that's the way they know to go to market because that's the way they've been going to market. These small disruptive brands are changing the way people think about food. One of the things I love about these small disruptive emerging brands is that they're doing things that no one else has thought of. They're thinking out of the box. So let's go one step further. Snacking occasions. In terms of meal occasions, people don't eat 3 squares a day. They eat a lot of snacks. So if you're an emerging brand, and if you've got your product in a snack pouch or snack wrapper, and you can change and differentiate that and get it into different shelves, different markets quickly, then it allows you to execute more efficiently. And as you become more efficient in your ability to execute and get that product on a store shelf, it allows you to start getting revenue right away, earning revenue right away, so you can start growing and paying back your investors and so on and so forth. So the reason this is so critically important is it gives small emerging brands a unique and sustainable competitive advantage. So instead of waiting, like you were saying, where you're a chip company, you've got packaging that you ordered 9 months ago before you can put that on a retailer's shelf, well, okay, that's fine if you've been in business for a while. But if you haven't been in business for a while, or you've got a new label, let's say that you're going along and everything's fine, and now all of a sudden you get a non-GMO certification, like you said, well, wait a minute, you want to be able to celebrate that on your packaging, but that means a complete packaging redesign. So you've got to kind of start from the ground up almost to redesign it, or you could just use print-on-demand packaging. So the benefit of this to the consumer is that you can get the product in the hands of the consumer a lot faster. And more importantly, if you can use this technology to align your product with your brand messaging, then you can encourage, you can invite younger shoppers and shoppers who are really interested in supporting those missions to buy your brand, like the Lohas consumer, for example. Lohas Lifestyle, Health, and Sustainability. That's a unique consumer group that I talk about a lot because that group is not price sensitive, at least not compared to a lot of traditional shoppers. They want what they want, and they want products that will align with what their personal goals, their personal missions. So whether or not you're helping with food deserts in the U.S. or whatever your mission is, that's a consumer that's going to gravitate toward that. And by the way, a lot of the younger consumers, millennial, Gen Z, etc., are the consumers that are really fueling those missions. So when we're talking about how this works and why this is important, one of the things that you've shared with me is that a lot of small brands don't think of packaging in the right way. Can you explain that, please? And then as you're explaining it, what should brands listening to this be thinking about? What should they be looking for? What questions should they be asking into their packaging suppliers?
Uh, I'd never thought about it until just now when you said it. But maybe the biggest piece of advice I can give emerging brands when it comes to packaging, sourcing packaging, which is the part of everything they do that they spend the least amount of time thinking about, is they keep asking every supplier or every broker or anyone who says they can source packaging for you, everything they tell you, ask them why.
Good question.
Right?
And ask them to back it up.
Because what they're going to understand is that this is the way it is. 150,000 minimum per SKU, 8 to 12 weeks to deliver. You have to buy your plates, which is the way that you print and all that. So what they're not being told is you don't have to take that. And this is to your point that you've recognized is when you finally get that second round of funding, you don't want to tie up all that cash with packaging, even though you may have got 5 cents a package less, but you're holding 9 months worth of inventory.
Yes.
That's probably going to change. It's like, don't put yourself in that position. You're far better off paying what you need to pay for the packaging to get it when you need it with what you need on it. And whether that's in Seattle or New York or Cincinnati, you can start to deploy customized packaging, even down to if it's e-commerce and somebody orders it through Amazon, put their name on it, personalize it to them. You can do that. It's not going to cost any more if you found a relationship with a good digital printer. So I like to think of so it's always baffled me, Daniel, how much packaging is made every single second. So you walk through these plants and it's just, oh my God, I know that brand. And you see these big, giant rolls of packaging that are 5 or 6 across that are going to get slit and put on different packaging lines. And we're talking about a massive, just continuous launch of packaging into the world that is designed on purpose to outlive your great-great-grandchildren. But to think about not sending those big jumbo rolls everywhere, think about it differently. Cloud-based infrastructure. What should be flowing around the world and around North America shouldn't be physical, heavy rolls of packaging film. It should be artwork and ideas that you can deploy to the one closest to you. Just like if you go to a FedEx business office and you live in I know you're in Colorado somewhere. Let's say you're in Denver. You don't send that job to Los Angeles and go to Los Angeles to pick it up. You send it to the one closest to you.
Right. Well, and that's so critically important. That's dramatically, radically changing the way people can do things, the way people get their product on shelf. And so now, one of the things you mentioned a minute ago, and let's go back to this, it's something actually you talked about at the beginning. So you've always said to me that recycling is a fool's errand. So let's back up and let's talk a little bit about that and why this is important. You just mentioned that a lot of the big brands, when you go to the plants, have tons and tons and tons of rolls of packaging laying around, literally ready to be used, ready to be cut, ready to be put onto a line. Now, the reality is that, like I said, I like to feel good about the fact that I'm going out of my way to recycle. We recycle a lot more than we throw away. That's because that's important to me. That's important to a lot of other consumers as well. But the reality is if I put a product out into the recycle bin, 9 out of 10 times it's getting thrown away. And now that we're not shipping our trash, if you can believe that we even did that to begin with, to China, now we've got recyclables that is becoming unmanageable. And I've heard stories about how because we don't have the infrastructure to be able to support it, a lot of that recyclable material is just going to get thrown away anyhow. So can you talk about what do you mean when you say that recycling is a fool's errand?
And I like that term because it gets people's attention. But if you Google the definition of a fool's errand, it is a journey that isn't going to have the end that you believe. So let's unwrap recycling. So recycling, like with aluminum and glass, it's infinitely recyclable. You can take a soda can, clean it, melt it, and make another can out of it. Packaging plastics, that's not the case. You may have 2, 3, maybe 4 passes theoretically before the polymer is no good to be used. But in reality, you will never take a pouch of string cheese and turn it back into a pouch of string cheese. So it's not recycling, it's refurbishing. I like to joke and say it's reprocessing, refurbishing. We'll just call it refurbling. So we're going to refurble these packaging materials, which means it's going to go into IKEA furniture or dog frisbees if it's collected. And that's the problem. The reason it's a fool's errand is to recycle flexible packaging requires a coordination at minimum of human behavior. And you do not control human behavior. I believe history has proven that to us. So by the time you're in your 20s, you're either a litterer who doesn't care or you're not. You can't change that. So it's not about what's collected for recycling. It's about what will inevitably escape, and that is not going to slow down or change. It's what escapes the net. That's the problem. So I was recently sent a blog from it was a Doritos bag they found off the coast of one of the barrier islands in North Carolina. And the question was, is this a throwback? So it looks like the original because it is, but at the bottom it's got inkjet date 1979, which is 1 year after they stopped using cellophane, which is the film that my company makes, which is naturally earth digestible, to polypropylene, which means that it will go at least 40 years in the ocean and look pretty darn good, because it does look pretty darn good after floating around for that long. So for any brand, big or small, why would you ever want to put your product in a package that's going to outlive so many generations when you simply don't have to? E-commerce doesn't require 9 months of shelf life. You're delivering the product to the consumer because they want it. If they stick it in their cupboard for 9 months and fail to eat it, shame on them. I do it all the time. I hate when I have to throw food out for something that I wanted. I bought it. I never even opened the package, and now it's past its expiration date. But you look at things like this is easy stuff, right? This is a little wrap. So when we take that little mint out, that wrapper, how much of that do you think actually even makes it to the wastebasket? That will outlive multiple generations. Same with everything. We gum and film that this film will outlive generations. So it's almost an irresponsibility to not do something about it. And I think that's the reality of it is it is changing. But there's confusion as to what to do about it. But there's a lot of energy behind the recycling agenda or desire, because lest you have to change, so I don't have to do anything new, so I don't have to stop doing things old. But there's also a lot of emphasis behind it. But in the end, for me personally, Daniel, I don't think society has the time to prove me right or wrong that it's a fool's errand. Because if we continue to pump plastics that the only end state of that plastic is to break down into tiny little microparticles that are infecting the fish, the crustaceans, the microorganisms in the sea. It's getting into the soil. The impact of it, we just don't even fully understand the impact of what we've already done, let alone the fact that we have this massive spigot of trillions of these things that are going everywhere.
And I'd appreciate you sharing that. And so one of the things that I'd recommend anyone watching this do is check out our course. It's a free course, Earth Digestible Print on Demand Packaging, and I'll be starting to put a link to it in this at the end of the show. But the reason this is important, and the reason I wanted to highlight that, is because in that free mini course, we talk about how those microparticles end up in the soil. Okay, so we talk about how those microparticles end up in the soil and how they end up in the food and in this and everything that we're consuming. And so I'll leave that in that class there. So Earth Digestible Print on Demand Packaging. So on that note, what does Earth Digestible mean? And then why is that such a unique technology? And again, put a link to the other program that we put together where we've got a really good explanation about it. But can you frame it? Can you talk a little bit about it now?
Yes. And the term Earth Digestible was really a term that we came up with because we saw so much confusion, misinformation. The term, if you look at the actual definition of the term biodegradable, it does say that it biodegrades by the digestion from the Earth's biome, which means microorganisms that exist everywhere except glaciers in the desert. Mm-hmm. But that term has been somewhat tainted or misused. So there's a industry accepted with industry standards around what is compostable. So compostable packaging, you've got industrial composters, roughly 5,000 of them across the U.S., in various stages of accepting packaging, understanding the role packaging. For them, it's really not accepting packaging so much as it is getting packaging that shouldn't be there, gets into it. But compostable has an actual definition, but it still confuses people because then they say, well, what about home compostable? Well, there's no U.S. standard for that. There is in Europe, but these are complicated matters where Earth Digestible simply means this. We're building packaging using only materials that have been certified or validated that microorganisms will eat it. So this package will be eaten by microorganisms in the world, no matter where it ends up. If it ends up in an industrial composting center, it will be digested. If it ends up blowing down the highway, it'll be digested. If it ends up in the ocean, technically it will be digested because those microorganisms exist there, just not at as high of a concentration as what you would find in a composting center, but it won't float 40 years in the ocean. That's what's important. So when people, I call it getting wrapped around the wrong axle. There's a lot of wrapping around the axle of municipalities aren't collecting it or composting centers aren't taking it. All of those things are all valid conversations, but we can't let perfection get in the way of progress either. So the first thing you do, you don't start scooping water out of the boat if you haven't plugged the hole. So right now we're not talking. So if you want to focus on anything immediately, don't focus on putting stuff in your recycle bin because it's not going to go to the recycle center anyway. And in your bin, by the way, if you put anything that's a film, even if that package is recyclable, you're guaranteeing that everything in that bin is going to the landfill, if not already, because they don't take film. So the problem is it's what's not getting to the landfill is the problem. Focus on that. Then as a brand, start putting your product in packaging that is Earth Digestible, because then you're not trying to control or ask for coordination of human behavior. You're not asking them to do store take back. You're not subsidizing the problem through TerraCycle or other means. You're literally doing the best thing you can do as a brand to put your product in a safe package. And if it doesn't quite have the same, for example, barrier properties of what you've been using, you need to ask yourself, how do we even know what's needed? Because again, the industry today is so incredibly over-engineered that no one really knows what's good enough. especially if it's an e-commerce channel, it's not going to sit on a shelf. There's not a 9-month path to, so it's different. We got to think about things differently. And I've even seen cases where brands have reformulated the product. Let's say it's got more water in it, then so they can create a less water version that works really well with earth digestible packaging. So again, I think it's a context of a space of rethinking it, but the acceptance of the fact that it's more expensive should be diluted by the fact that we failed as an industry to recognize packaging as a profit center.
And when you're saying more expensive, we're not talking about a lot. We're talking about a little bit that is going to align with your core, with your end consumer. And so leveraging, again, your mission around what you're packaging, not just what's inside the package, but your packaging as well, is a good way to help offset those costs and differentiate your product at retail and get just on demand packaging. And again, these are all part of a go-to-market strategy. You might pay a few pennies more for package, but how much money are you going to spend waiting around for 6 months or whatever for your packaging to come in? And then how much are you going to spend on a year's supply of packaging that you're not going to use for quite a long time? So there are a lot of things to consider. I'm of the belief that you need to be thinking about what can you do to grow your brand, get it on a retailer shelf today, and then start building momentum and to start, getting customers engaged in it. Now, you shared a lot of what I would call somewhat technical, sometimes confusing points. Let's make this really, really simple for anyone who doesn't understand the TerraCycle and what all that means. The bottom line is this. You have a choice as a brand to put a product out there. And instead of waiting for a municipality in one state or one region to adopt a certain strategy, this is where you as the brand can take leadership role in this, where you as the brand can own this conversation. And you, the brand, can start putting your product into a package that you can feel good about, that's going to get digested by the earth, that's not going to end up in a landfill. And even if it does end up in a landfill, it's still going to digest. So the point is this. Instead of waiting for someone else to fix something downstream, you as a brand need to take responsibility for this today. And you as a brand could take advantage of the fact that your customers want you to take that role, to take that stand, to be that brand that differentiates the category. Because as small brands, like we started this conversation, we're talking about at Expo West, there are a handful of small brands that are trying to change this conversation, and they're trying to drive the industry. And if enough of these small brands get on board with this, then the big brands are going to get on board, and that's going to lower the cost, make this whole thing more efficient. But long story short is that this is something that we all need to do for our future, for our products. And the best part about it is this is what your customers want. Kelly, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to share?
Yeah, I would. So that's excellent summary of it, and I think there's another misconception by the brands. Like sometimes I get awed by, like I find it intriguing how many things are out there and available that people need, but they haven't found it yet, even though they're out looking for it. Mm-hmm. It's almost like everyone's become so overworked and stressed and distraction addiction. Like basically, there's a cartoon that shows two cavemen pulling a cart with square wheels, and there's a caveman holding this round wheel, and the guys pulling cart are saying, no, too busy. Mm-hmm. So part of that is helping brands realize that we're seeing a massive mega trend shift back towards this direction. What does that mean? Well, it means plant-based materials, and it doesn't have, so being plant-based doesn't make it necessarily compostable, just like petroleum-based doesn't make it necessarily not compostable, because the microorganisms are blind to it. They're looking for specific things. And so you can come up with safe packaging in a different way. I've had some, larger brands say, well, I don't want to use any packaging that's going to compete with food. Producing food to feed the world is not our problem. The fact that we can only harvest effectively 50% at best of the crop and the other 50% goes to waste, that's the problem, not that what we are harvesting. And the same with packaging waste. So to me, that's the wrong way to look at it. And even LCAs, which is life cycle analysis. Well, what's your life cycle analysis? Well, it's a difficult conversation because this is an emerging area versus this installed mega billions of pounds per year that you're comparing that efficiency to. So yeah, it is more expensive. But the takeaway is this, Daniel. We're not talking about going back to rudimentary caveman days of packaging. We're talking about well-established, vetted, proven structures that work. I mean, when I hold these two packages up, you can't tell that this one will outlive multiple generations and this one is earth digestible. So brands truly can get packaging that lets them have their cake, but the earth can eat it too.
I like
no
that.
matter what you end up.
No, that's good. And again, that's why we're doing this. It's so critically important that brands understand this. And again, if you can align this with your messaging, if you can align this, will help your consumers understand that this is what's important and why this is important. And I mean, you've brought up a lot of great points. And long story short, this is the future. And mainstream CPG companies are struggling in every category. And it's these small disruptive brands that are changing the way consumers buy products, the way consumers think about food. And it's these small disruptive brands that are changing the way that retailers think about what they put on their shelves, etc. So in summary, this is the future. And if you're a small disruptive brand, this is a technology you need to embrace. Eventually, I would say that probably most every brand would be in it. I hope sooner than later. But the reality is you have an opportunity as a small brand to take a leadership role in this, to be first to market perhaps in your category, and even better yet, to be the first one to start aligning your mission, your product, with the packaging with your consumer, which again gives you a substantial, sustainable competitive advantage over everyone else. Remember, generically speaking, retailers don't make anything. What they want is a product that drives shoppers into their store. What they sell is the real estate that your product takes up on their shelf. And if you can help that retailer drive profit in the category and drive traffic in their store by aligning your customer with what they're trying to sell, that's a win-win for you.
But we actually do have customers that have shared with us that use NatureFlex films to make compostable, earth digestible packaging for their products, that they have seen 20 to 40% year over year growth in that product. Wow. With retailers because the packaging is earth digestible. So there's not an absence of recognizing it. I think it's really comes down to understanding recycling versus earth digestible by that definition, as well as not understanding that packaging shouldn't be a cost center. It should be a profit center. So when you say print on demand printing of earth digestible packaging, you were spot on by creating very simplified combinations of materials that do everything they need to do for all of packaged consumer goods. Earth digestible, print on demand, do it regionally, execute locally, get things out to market. Every single package is uniquely scannable. You have a direct relationship. So then now we can take packaging to really make change, right? So when composters in Washington in the state of Washington say, well, I want to take packaging, but I can't afford to lose margin if I have to filter out packaging that shouldn't have gotten there. Well, what if the state subsidized you to do that? Yeah, that would be great, so long as it's a long-term subsidy and it doesn't change with new administration. Yeah, as a brand, as an emerging brand on the West Coast that's, Washington based, I can say, you know what, I'm going to take my bar, my granola bar, my bag of nuts, whatever it is, and I'm going to put on this package. Somewhere will be messaged on here that the consumer will know enough to scan it. It's going to take them to a website, not to enter their information, merely to look at its accuracy. To age, how many kids you have, where you live. With that type of software technology, there's so much they already know about you. And you're saying, do you support the state of Washington subsidizing composting centers to accept packaging? You better believe I do. Boom. Just like that, you've got 30, 40, 50 million signatures saying, hey, Mr. Politician, we expect you to do this because it's important to us. That's how you bring truth to power. So packaging is this untapped space that you can utilize that no one's taking advantage of.
I can go one step further. This is even better. I mean, I'm glad you brought this up. So here's something else you need to consider. Kind of hinted at it before. If I go into the store and I buy your product, you don't know anything about me. You don't know how I used the product, if I shared it with anyone, if I liked it, didn't like it, etc. My point is this. Because of the way that we do business today on retail, we lose effectively that customer. We lose that relationship with that customer. So if you can invite me to become a part of your community outside of a traditional store, outside of online retail, then you can nurture that relationship with me. So the advantages are this. If you want to try some new product innovation, I already like your product. I'm already familiar with your brand. If you send it to me, I can give you an honest evaluation of it, rather than sending it to a focus group where people are getting paid to render a decision, and yet they may not know your product. They may not know the category. So that's better than any focus group by a long shot. Here's another thing. Trade marketing. About 80 to 90%, about 70 to 90% of all trade dollars are wasted. And what I mean by that is the purpose of trade marketing is simply to get your product in the hands of a new shopper, to invite a new shopper, a new potential shopper to try your product. It's not designed to reward me for buying something that I plan on buying anyhow. Now, you can argue whether or not that's a good idea or a good thing or a bad thing, but how about this instead? If you can, instead of rewarding me at shelf to buy a product that I was already planning on buying, but instead reward me through your community, your online community that's tied to your website, etc., then if you can do that, then you might give me an even better deal or more of an incentive to become a loyal shopper, to share my product testimonials with my customers, with your customers, my friends, etc. So the point is this, there are a lot of great use cases for developing a relationship with a consumer outside of the traditional retailer, online, and brick and mortar. The great part about this is that when you've got print on demand, then you can actually, like you said, customize the packaging to drive that consumer community, to drive that shopper community, so that now you've got a thriving community or a thriving tribe outside of the store. And so if a store closes down in my local market, or if or if a online retailer decides that they're not going to sell my product anymore for whatever reason, it doesn't matter, because you still own that customer. At the end of the day, that's your greatest asset. And by leveraging this strategy and this technology combined, now you don't have to worry about all the ups and downs with different markets. You don't have to worry about a lot of your competitors trying to buy shoppers, etc., to the degree that you did before. So this gives you an even greater sustainable competitive advantage, and it allows you to get a higher return on your investment in terms of your trade dollars. What do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. It's the new way. It's the future of the food industry. It's the way it's going to go. The battle inside the brick is going to change. The brick will still be there, but it's not about a battle inside the brick. It's about delivering what consumers want. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they want is personalization. They want it when they want it. And they want genuine, authentic brands who believe in something that they also believe in. And they seriously don't want that package to do any harm. And this is the perfect combination. So again, like everything you said, is just more examples about packaging is a profit center. It is the best source of marketing and advertising your company could ever do, is the package.
Well, and another thing, you go one step further. Let's say that you want to have a special promotion. You make a product that complements another product during a holiday. So hot dogs and chips or condiments or whatever. And you could actually co-promote that specific holiday promotion on your packaging at that particular retailer. Or you could put that retailer's logo on your packaging. The sky's the limit. Basically, you're limited by your imagination. But the point is this. The technology exists. And if you wanted to become a leader in your category, if you wanted to differentiate yourself, it's there for the asking. So again, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. Anything else?
No, no, that was great. Thank you, Daniel.
Cool.
Always appreciate talking to you.
I want to thank Kelly for coming on today and for sharing his wisdom and his insights and for making this very complicated topic simple and easy to understand. I also want to remind you that this is a podcast snippet of our free mini course, The Secret Compostable Packaging Strategy Your Brand Needs to Know. I'll put a link to that in today's show notes and on today's podcast webpage. This week's free downloadable guide is the Essential New Item Checklist, the recipe for success. In this free downloadable guide, I cover the key things that you need to have in place to be able to build a healthy foundation for your brand. The recipe to help your brand get your product on more store shelves and in the hands of more shoppers. You can get that instantly by going to the podcast webpage, which is brandsecretsandstrategies.com/session 128. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.